Hi, welcome to Hope in the Light of Suicide. I'm Tammy White. I'm the founder and CEO of the Bobby White Foundation, and my co-host.
And I'm Bonnie Snyder, co-host.
We want to welcome you guys to our show, and first we've got we're going to do the sponsor thing because it's really important. This is our 19th episode.
It is.
I know, isn't that crazy? We started this back in December, but and we couldn't do this without John and Rob from WeBeam TV, and we really want to thank them. And our kind of, I don't know what you call it, partner to help raise funding to support our show, Kindest. We want to thank them for helping us out, and also. Gulfside Custom T-shirts.
Yes.
Just recently, we just received our new T-shirts.
Oh, there you go. Rob's got it up on the,
Yeah.
on the screen.
And we've got both a regular T-shirt and we got a V-neck T-shirt that is kind of more of a women's, if you want, more of a women's type T-shirt. But either one of them are great. It has the foundation logo on the back, and again, also Greg Schindler's State Farm office. They're continuing their fundraising efforts to help pay for a show. All you have to do is call and get a quote and mention the Bobby White Foundation, and they'll donate towards the foundation. And their goal is actually to sponsor one complete show.
And just, I know we had the logo up on the screen, but just to show you, here's what the T-shirt looks like from the front, and there's there's the foundation logo on the back, and yeah, you're right, Tammy. I could not agree with you more. The support that we get from our community partners in sponsoring the show, between Greg Schindler and Tim at Gulfside, and then of course we could not do this without John and Rob here at WeBeam TV.
Oh, definitely. So last week was kind of a rough show, but we got through it pretty well.
You got through it.
Got through it pretty well with the help of you and my sister-in-law Mary. We were celebrating the life of my husband Bobby. The whole week, and I always forget throughout the year how tough that week is, or how tough even April is, because we lost my mother-in-law on April 1st, we lost Bobby on April 8th, and then my father-in-law passed away years ago on April 23rd, which was the day after him and my mother-in-law's wedding anniversary. He waited like an hour and a half after the 22nd when he left us. So yeah, and I always forget. And I was talking to my neighbor, and I'm like, I should remember this and just take that whole week off. Because it doesn't matter what I try and do, it just doesn't work. It's almost, even 5 years later, it's as difficult as it was when it first happened.
Yeah, it's amazing how sometimes, when we're processing things, it hits you like right out of the blue, without warning. I find myself, and this is something, I talk to, the groups that I work with, in terms of, how do you handle, this, just stress in general, to include, that stress and feelings, that you get when you're processing, anniversaries, whether it is, a birthday or a wedding anniversary, or, we call it what is it, wing day? I think I've heard some call it my angel wing.
Angel wings, or
Angel
heaven
wing day, or heaven
day.
Heaven day. Some faith people call it your reborn day. And, sometimes, I know for me, what happens is I find myself sometimes in the middle of the day, and then it's like, oh my goodness, today is whatever the day is.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, but, I wonder, like, do you ever feel guilty if you're like in the middle of the day and then it hits you? Today is the day that, whatever.
No, I don't, because it's too much ingrained in me.
Ah.
And yeah, no, days like that, and I don't know why. I'll tell you why, actually. This used to drive Bobby crazy, because I would have like an anniversary. I could remember everything, like when we first went out, when we first moved into our first house together, and I would always celebrate all these things. And he goes, "How do you do that? You remember
Gotcha.
everything." And that's just the way that I've always been. I mean, I know the anniversary date of when we moved into our first house together in Fort Lauderdale. That was back in 1988. And even when we moved up here, I would still celebrate, that day with him. And he would just shake his head. He goes, "I don't know how you do that." So yeah, I've always been that way, particularly, in our relationship. Yeah. So the days don't really sneak up on me at all.
I had a former sister-in-law who had that same talent. We always looked to her, hey, when is so-and-so's birthday? Or, unfortunately, she passed away this year, not too long ago. But that same thing, that penchant for, I could remember, she could probably remember, what day, day, time, and hour she bought her first pair of sneakers. Some people just have that talent. But I think for me, a lot of it is, the guilt comes from, I could be in the middle of the day, and it's not so much that I've forgotten what the day was, even though I'm like, oh my gosh, it is that day. The guilt sometimes comes with, did I honor the day, appropriately or enough? The other guilt that I think, sometimes creeps in is, did I do enough? And I still, there are times that I still grapple with, did I do enough, or what could I have done differently? And then, of course, that professional side of me kicks in and says, stop it.
Right.
That's distorted thinking. Don't do the coulda, shoulda, wouldas.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
But it brings me
But
back.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you remember when Carl was on, it brought me back to that, what he stated, would it have bought us another day, another week,
Right.
another year? Did we just, prolong the inevitable?
Right.
And, I think it's important, that we recognize that we probably could not. I hate, I have a love-hate relationship with the phrase, it was meant to be.
Yeah, well, I think the phrase, the words need to change. But it's like, I've had this conversation with our producer, John. And this is just the way that we believe, is this is the way it was written.
Yes.
We don't have to like it. We have to deal with it, but this is the way their life was written. And if we, what if we knew that?
And, it does, when you hear, to John's point, this is the way it was written, it also brings me back to the Law Survivors Bill of Rights and the whole grief cycle, and that last stage being acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And what I feel is part of what makes acceptance so difficult for some of us is, this was just not supposed to happen yet. Trying to make sense of something that you can't make sense of. Or, trying to make sense of something that this is the way it was written. Or having the inability to to reconcile. This is, this is
Right.
kind of how it is. Like, you can take the experience and let it, consume you and destroy you, or you can take the experience and, turn it into, make a positive out of something that is, absolutely, it's absolutely so negative. And I think for us, if I look at you, for instance, starting the foundation, the Purple Fold and the Purple Folder campaign, getting, the message out to people, as it relates to, or educating people that there are resources out for, people who, have lost, who have lost someone. What I like about the foundation is, even though it started from the aspect of, suicide, as a function from, that's not a function, as a result of, Bobby's death by suicide, it speaks to anybody who has suffered a loss. Because I look at it and I can attribute, the Purple Folder to losing Aydin, which was a suicide.
Right.
So one would be like, well, wait a minute, now that foundation only deals with suicide. No, and I was like, that might have been, what the springboard was for it. It is, it's more, I'm going to use the word global than that, because I can take that same information that's in that folder and apply it to, losing Patrick, and of course we've talked about Patrick's loss, a couple of times. Like, was it an accidental overdose, or was it a accidental overdose that it was masked by, a suicide? I hate to even say that.
I know. Yeah. Well, and that happens quite often, and that's where there's this gray area, especially with the overdoses. It's often hard to tell whether it was an accidental overdose or if it was intentional suicide.
And tragically, this week in Pasco, we have had so many overdoses. And
Well, and we've also had, I think, since the beginning of the year, we are almost for teen suicides at the number we were for the entire year last year. I just, yesterday, Pasco County Sheriff's Office referred the foundation to us, a woman who lost her 19-year-old son last week. And in the last couple of weeks, we've given out a lot of these Purple Folders. But I don't know, I was thinking about it, I was like, I think that we're like getting towards the end of this COVID thing, but and I can see it and be hopeful about it, but it seems like the overdose rates and the suicide rates are continuing to skyrocket.
Well, and I think what I look at it, and of course, I don't want to say I look at it globally. I love something about that word globally in me. I don't know. But, I look at, on this side, we have like the light at the end of the tunnel where, hopefully, with, the vaccines and everything else that's going on, getting to the end of COVID. We're coming out of this pandemic. We can get back to, life, as normal life. What life was, pre-pandemic. But then I
Right.
was like, what the devil is normal anyway? And what does that look like? But at the same time, it is, okay, so we may get to a point where, we don't have to socially distance as much. We probably don't have to wear a mask anymore. We can, get back out, to, meeting with friends and families and eating out and whatnot. At the same time, there is that, the stress and trauma and grief, for individuals, when you consider what was the result of being locked down for the last, what is it, 18 months now, is it? Give or take?
Yeah, it's good. Well,
It's close to 18 months?
close to, well, I'd say I stopped doing everything on March 13th of last year. I had a speaking engagement on the 12th, and then we were shut down on the 13th of March.
Okay, so March to March is 12. This
So
is
we're at
April.
12
Okay, so 12, 13 months.
Yeah.
How did I come up with 18? My math. And I'm good at
It
math. and
feels like
I know, and I love math. But when I look at, all right, folks, not good. No, I am good at math. You wouldn't tell by that. Anyway. But anyway, back on a serious note, see, we told you we would lighten things up every once in a while. Yeah. But if you look at over the past year, we've had people that have lost jobs. We have people that have lost health insurance. We have people that have lost their homes. We have people that have lost their cars, their livelihoods. How many people are homeless? How I think of very, very early during the pandemic. A woman that I graduated high school with, and my heart broke for her. And how quickly her mom was diagnosed with COVID. It almost seemed like, was ill on Tuesday, diagnosed on Wednesday, and she was gone on Thursday. I mean, it just seemed, it seemed to go like that quickly. And, we're social media, we're social media friends as well. It's kind of how we keep in touch with the world. But listening to her agony over, maybe agony is not the word I want to use, but I'm gonna say it had to be agonizing that here she loses her mom, and they could not have a service for her.
And that, how many hundreds of thousands of people that has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't even say goodbye.
Right.
They couldn't even be with their loved ones as they were transitioning horribly. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, watching, on, like on the news, people who were, Zooming or, FaceTiming with their loved one in the hospital. I watched an interview with a woman who, she lost her husband. And, they actually somehow or another filmed them talking to each other, FaceTiming. And it was like, this is how she had to say goodbye to her husband.
Well, and that's very traumatic. That's a trauma that many people are living with, and that's hard. It's another form of trauma.
It is.
It's devastating. Yeah, it's hard, and it's hard to figure out how to, even during these times to, honor, people that have passed. Going back, with Bobby during this past week, Bobby liked bonfires. He loved bonfires. We had one Native American call him, I don't know, the fire starter or fire or something, some fire god or something, one time when we used to have a lot of parties at the house. And so on Easter Sunday, I started a bonfire for the resurrection, and not thinking at first this is what I was going to do. Mm-hmm. So I started the fire that day, and then I thought, oh, this is the week, and Bobby's, gone. That was the morning of our show last week. I got up, the fire was still going, so this was on Thursday, started on Sunday. Went out there with my cup of coffee and my wonderful mug you gave me, and just sat there having my coffee and, contemplating and thinking, and before I came in for our show. And that fire continued until we got the rains on Saturday night.
Nice.
And it was like, oh, perfect timing. The rains are coming. I don't have to put the fire out or even let it go out. The rains took it out on Saturday night, and that was my goal, was to have it continue all week. You know, quite often when we would have fires together, when Bobby would start them, we'd keep them going for a week. You know, just because, which I had a lot of wood to burn anyway. So, and that was my way of honoring him. One of my cousins called me, I don't know, Tuesday or Wednesday night, and she's like, "Tam, you're having an awful lot of fires. Are you all right?" I'm like, "No, I'm fine. It's, you know, it's just my way of honoring Bobby," because we couldn't get a lot of family together, and but that way I could share it and, just do that. That's what felt comfortable for me.
And, it's nice that we have, these different ways that we, celebrate or honor, those that have left us. My my backyard, my back patio, that was Patrick's sanctuary. And I would jokingly, would tell people, when they would come over, I was like, I don't go in the backyard much. That's Patrick's place. I was like, I think I said, I only go in the backyard when it's time to mow the grass or weed eat or, something like that. Or, if I need something, from, the shed or something. I said, but other than that, I was like, no, that's Patrick's place back there. And, I found myself, here lately, spending more time out, on the patio than, what I had. And I could blame, that you didn't spend a lot of time out on patios. When did you have time to really do anything? Well, you're always working, kind of thing. But I have this blue Adirondack chair, and it's Patrick's chair. And, I sit back and I look at this, chair, and like for New Year's, we had some friends over, and, we had a fire in the fire pit, and we're all sitting outside. And I think I shared the story in one of our earlier episodes. You have a few friends that smoke. I mean, Patrick was a smoker. And, they were like, do you have a butt can? I was like, no, there's an ashtray. And then it dawned on me, wait a minute. That's Patrick's ashtray. And I was like, okay, there's an ashtray. It's under, it's like, the patio table, and it's got like a shelf underneath the table. And that's where, Pat's ashtray, he kept the ashtray. Because like I said, Patrick was a smoker. I'm not, so, we don't, he'd never smoked in the house, because we just don't smoke in the house. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I just remember looking at, my friends as they were smoking, and I was like, it's an ashtray. But whatever you do, please, please, please do not empty the ashtray. And, they kind of looked at me like, what? And I said, do not empty the ashtray. And like, why? Here it is almost 2 years, it's coming up on 2 years, hard to believe. And I refused to empty his ashtray. The other thing is I used to have 2 palm trees, in my backyard, that were perfectly spaced apart, where you could put a hammock between the 2. Mm-hmm. And, I remember, Patrick was a collector of things. Amongst the things, he collected I think I have 300 decks of cards.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, he loved playing cards. So he had 300 decks of cards. I probably have 15 games of dominoes. Mm-hmm. He found right before he left their eggs, and it's a egg puzzle. I'll bring one in one day to show you. This is Patrick's egg puzzle. And he would, Mom, when you're out and about, if you see one of these, and he shows me this egg, mm-hmm. You just get these for me. I probably have 30 of these eggs. About 1,000 pair of socks. And, with, coming, full back around to, the backyard, 6 hammocks.
Oh, really?
And yes. And so the palm...
You can only use one at a time.
Well, Patrick has this thing where, I almost want to say, so...
I have a hammock, too, but I only have one.
Well, I think his thing was a hammock, the hammock of the week, something like that. Or, because I think, I told you he was into bathrobes. Mm-hmm, he wore, it's like the... heavy terry cloth robes.
I think that's really kind of a cool thing that he did.
Yeah, no, and he was like, "I'm all about this robe life," is what he would say. And he was, he did like this short, like minute and a half clip of, like, "Hello, it's me, it's your boy." He's always saying, it's your boy," and it's like, "I just want to show you guys, I'm about this robe." But anyway, going back to the backyard, the palm trees were spaced perfectly apart. That he strung a hammock between the two, and he had one hammock that had lights on it. It's like LED
cool.
lights through, the sides of this hammock. And, he was like, "Mom, you got to see this." And I'm looking at this hammock, and I was like, "A hammock with lights, what are they going to think of next?"
I think that's cool.
Well, there was one day I happened to be, I was in the house, and I, was going by the Florida room. My Florida room is finished. And, you could see the two palm trees, out of the back window. And I'm looking. The lights in the hammock were on. And I'm thinking to myself, how the lights of the hammock on? I didn't turn them on. There's nobody else but me here. Why are these, hammock lights on? Unfortunately, one of my palm trees was struck by lightning. So it was dead. I finally had to take it down. But I'm looking at, let me redo the backyard, the patio, and have, I don't know if I want to call it a shrine, but like you have the memorial garden for me, for Bobby. My patio is the memorial patio. Patty P's Patty P's patio kind of thing. But yeah, I do think it's important, that, we all recognize that, yes, loss is traumatic, and, we may never get over the loss. It is important, however, to, be okay, and going back to, when we highlighted the Law Survivors Bill of Rights, it's okay to go through this process. How you feel, that's
You have to do
for
it
your way. Yeah, your way, exactly.
Yeah, and you brought up, Bobby's Memorial Garden, and that's another thing that we do. My sister-in-law, Mary, who was on our show last week, came over after the show, but later that evening, and we refreshed his garden, and it looks really, and that's kind of like an annual thing that she and I do. Last year, she brought my great nephew Brady, and he helped plant new flowers in the garden, and it's and that's something that makes us feel, that makes us feel good. It makes us feel close to him. It's something that, like I said, Mary is, it's our thing every year that her and I do to remember Bobby and just remember the good times.
Those rituals help. I know with Aydin, this year the family did an escape room. 'Cause Aydin was, puzzles. That's Aydin and his dad. But that was picture that Rob just had up was actually taken at his birthday party a week before he died.
Oh, that's what that was.
If I remember correctly,
Yeah.
that was like his last party before he passed away. Because his birthday was the 8th and he was gone on the 14th. But doing, little, I don't want to say little things, but rituals, developing rituals or, planning rituals to remember, our loved ones. Like I said, Aydin could take a Rubik's Cube and, you could hand him a jumbled Rubik's Cube, here you go, Aydin. And before the day was out, he'd hand it back to you. It was done. So doing things like, escape room, that's like, to me, the ultimate giant puzzle, to honor him. That was really, it was great. It was like, next time, it was like, okay, next time, guys, when you do that, I hope to, of course, COVID was going on. It was difficult
Right.
for me to get back to the Midwest, for that one. Or with Patrick, it's the annual barbecue, because that was his last party, was a barbecue. And so, you and, Bobby's Garden, and, just making it okay to honor.
Well, you have to. I mean, you have to celebrate their lives, because it's really too much to be sad and hurt all the time, and when family and friends get together just to honor, their life. We actually, when Bobby passed away, had his celebration of life on April 29th of that year. And my mom flew down from Washington, and I think I had mentioned before, after Bobby passed away, she wanted me to just drop everything and move back to Washington. Well, I left there in 1979.
Right.
And Bobby and I had lived where we had lived at that time for 25 years, and we had a barbecue and bonfire. A couple of his friends managed the barbecue grills, because Bobby had probably 5 of them at the time. You talk about collecting. That's what Bobby did. He grills and cooking stuff. He had more grills than anybody that I knew, and had a bonfire and listened to music. I mean, that was Bobby, and we had so many people there. One fella, I had known him for years, ironically, and he's a sweet man. He was had a survey company here in town for many, many years, and he was head of the State Surveyors Association back when my first husband was killed. And he actually, when my first husband was killed, he was killed surveying, and I received a letter from him back then. That was 33 years prior. Well, it's been 33 years now, so 30 years prior or something like that. Anyways, received a letter from him from my first husband's death, and then when he found out about Bobby, of course, we live here now, he attended to pay respects. And we just had so many people there, and my mom afterwards, and it was supposed to run from 1 to 7, and it ended up being from 11 to 1 in the morning. And then my mom was like, okay, I'm not going to bother you anymore about, because she could see the love and the support from my friends and, my business relations with people in the community and stuff. And so, that's just what we do. And on his birthday, we had been, kind of doing a similar thing. We'd have a bonfire and order pizza. It would just pretty much be family, or like Russell and his family, that kid that he was kind of like the son we never had. Last year we didn't, because number one, it rained, and number 2, my niece had a baby. So and it was COVID, so we weren't able to do that, but I still had a bonfire. But you have to do that. It ironically, it does ease the pain a little bit for a while,
Well, and every once in a while,
remember the good times.
Absolutely. I mean, every once in a while we do get that little, twinge, but it's to be expected. It's normal. I try to. There was a couple of groups, that I'm in. One of the groups is called Parents Who Have Lost Their Sons. And it's just, as the name of the group suggests, just people who have lost their sons. And I thought about this for a moment, okay, what about people who have lost daughters? Whatnot?
Right.
And but I didn't create the group. Who am I to judge? And I look at some of the comments that are made in that particular group. Then there's another group. it is loss and grief, and I know I'm butchering, what the name of that particular group is, but I find it comforting sharing, um, you know, uh, like sharing my story with other people who are in, much like we do here. Um, but I also find that more oftentimes than not, um, it's not that I share a lot, on those platforms, um, but I do find myself offering support and commentary to people, others who, have shared, um, and listening to how everybody else celebrates, their remembrance of, their loved ones. And one of the ladies had posted, how did it say? It had to do with, people probably get tired of hearing us talk about our loved ones. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking to myself, you're right. At the same time, I found myself doing like one of these, like, oh, I'm so ashamed of myself, because it made me think of like people who have lost friends, and I'm thinking of one person in particular. And I remember there was a period of time, where I was like, if I hear this person's name one more time, you know, I think I'm going to vomit. And, of course, fast forward to, I think to myself, how could I be so callous? How could I be so cold? How could I be so unfeeling? It's like, with, Aydin and Patrick, like it slapped me right in the face. Not, not so much in a way that, in your face now.
Right.
All right, let's see how you
Right.
do. I didn't take it like that, it made me think of, conversations, like I said, that I had with Kira when I went home, it's okay, we'll get through this. Um, he wouldn't want you to be sad, all the cliche-ish, kind of phrases that we say to each other when, we're trying to comfort somebody. And, I remember saying it to Kira. That was some of the dumbest stuff I ever said. like that. Now I'm looking at it now. That is just that was just dumb. And it took me a while to process. That was really dumb. To go back and reconcile. No, actually, it wasn't dumb. It isn't dumb. Um, it did put things into a different perspective. As I say, when I'm doing my daily work, which, working with, substance abuse and, substance misuse and mental health, on a daily basis, you go in it with, oh, I know what I was taught in school, and I know, and I have these life experiences and whatnot. I'm always struck by how certain life experiences put work into a different perspective. Like when you're talking about, say, like abuse and trauma and stuff like that. Okay, I can understand that. Being an abuse survivor, I could understand and process suicide and substance misuse and grief and loss and everything else like that. Totally different perspective. When now, I'm one of those statistics.
You're living the experience.
Yes, exactly. It's like I am now a loss survivor. So when people say, well, you don't understand, well, let's say we're talking about suicide. You don't understand. Yes, I do. This is Aydin. Substance, addiction, lost to substance addiction, and I'm like, yes, I do. This is Patrick. But even before Patrick, if I rewind and think about other family members that, were lost through, my younger brother, Albeit his death, he was struck by a car. But he was intoxicated when it happened. Now we have, theories on how, his death was ruled, an accident. It was, the woman, she didn't intentionally run him over. It was an accident. At the same time, it's like, if these things would not have happened, if these pieces were not in place, would he still be here? And I think of the toll that it took on my family, especially our baby brother, who, before, my brother's death, the two boys would wrestle, the two younger siblings. They would wrestle with each other all the time. And this particular day, my brother who died, was, picking at his younger brother. Hey, let's wrestle. And my younger brother was like, I'm tired, like, dude, sit down. And he was like, okay, all right. Well, I'm going to go to, because he was going to walk to, they always think that's phrase, the corner store. Mm-hmm. So I walked to the store and, grab some, whether it was cigarettes or whatever he was going to get. And did not make it back home. Ouch. And so, I look at, the toll that it's taken on, my younger brother, who was like, if only I would have wrestled with him that time, he would have been tired. He would have gone to sleep. He would not have left, he wouldn't have had the energy to walk to the store, and thus, he
right.
He wouldn't have gotten hit.
Again, the woulda, coulda, shouldas, but
right. But at the same time, coming back full circle to this discussion, and how do we celebrate, the people that we lost? How do we, keep their memory alive while at the same time not getting so lost and consumed by, the emptiness, the hole
pain,
that was left, by them not being here, the hole that's in our heart because they're gone. I like the idea, or I try to practice the idea of giving them a legacy. What is their legacy? What do I want them to remember? How do I want them to be remembered, and what part can I play in that remembrance? And thus, here we are.
That's what
we are.
That's what we're doing here. Well, and and that's why I guess I started the foundation and our fundraisers. I mean, I never in my wildest dreams or nightmares would have ever thought I'd be doing what I've done in the last, couple of years, 2.5 years since, we started the foundation and had our first fundraiser. And yeah, it's kind of crazy. And our first T-shirts, and and like you had said, when we first started this, it was basically kind of simple, just to help suicide loss survivors. But as things have gone on, it's prevented suicides. We've prevented suicides. We have helped lost survivors. We've helped lost survivors not being able to go back to their homes because of the suicide, and getting new residents, and helping them with other things, getting them resources to help pay their electric bill, because when you're, especially in the beginning, in the middle of this storm, and you can't think straight, you don't know what's going on, and that's what we went through, and that's why this, so that we can help others go through it in a little bit more, I'm not going to say a better way, because there's nothing really going to be better about it, but maybe in a more manageable way.
Exactly. Like I'm always, amazed. I don't know if I want to use the word shocked, but honored, like I had a professional colleague who, mind you, I'd never, I don't think I had the conversation with him about the show. And, it was in a Zoom meeting a couple weeks ago. And he says, Bonnie, so why don't you tell us what you've been up to? And I was thinking for a moment, like, what is he talking about?
What are you talking about?
And I was thinking, all right, so, and I know me, I was like, oh, I know he's not talking anything illegal, because that wouldn't be it. That wouldn't be it. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so what is he talking about? And I was like, okay, and I'm not dating, so it's not that. What is he talking about? And then it hit me. Are you talking about the show? And of course, as my brain is processing, like, oh my gosh, how did you know about the show? That's somebody, it's a colleague that I don't see, frequently. But so I got really excited, and I was like, oh, well, this is kind of what we're doing. This is how it came about. It started, with, the foundation, and, kind of morphed into this. And, in this meeting, there were other people, as I started getting, like a couple of text messages and emails. I need to know more about that. That is like, did we know that this existed? And, let's get the word out and spread the word. And so, yeah, it's, it's taking off. It's taking off. It is serving, it's serving the purpose that it was intended to serve. And again, it is not just for suicide loss, survivors. It is for anyone.
It can be for any traumatic loss.
Yes.
And the word, I'm saying traumatic loss, that depends on the person, how traumatic their loss was for them. And yeah, it really is. When I have my down times, which are still quite often, and I kind of still feel like I haven't, really progressed so much, in the last 5 years. But then I have like my neighbor or a couple of friends, and they're like, Tammy, look what you have done.
Yes.
And my sister-in-law, Mary, being one of them. Look what you have done since Bobby died. You started the foundation. You started the annual fundraiser. We've got the Purple Folder program. You got your first grant funding the first year of the foundation, and now that grant funding is gone, and the foundation completely took over the Purple Folder program. And so I sit there when they tell me this, and I'm like, well, yeah, I guess you're right. But it's hard for me to see that because just of the way that I feel and process through it. And if somebody points it out, then I'm like, well, yeah, maybe you're right. I have done okay. I wish I felt that I've done better.
Well, Tammy,
and that's coming in time. I see now, especially with what happened this week. We have all the police departments have all the Purple Folders, and we have other community partners. And the sheriff's department this week referred from the victim's advocate, referred a gal to our foundation. And she told her, that, I was a lost survivor also, that I had lost my husband. And so when she came over with her husband yesterday, and we talked, and I gave her the Purple Folder and gave her a bunch, other resources that she really needed, then it's like, this is it. For some reason, I always feel like we should be further ahead than what we are, and I can automatically compare us to other local nonprofits. But I forget that our foundation has only been around 2.5 years. I'm comparing our foundation to other foundations that I know and people that I know that have been around 10, 15 plus years. And I'm like, if I look at it that perspective,
Mm-hmm.
then it's like, okay, it's you're still doing good. We're still doing good out in the community. It's,
I think of this in a way like um, a marathon.
oh yeah,
And back, when I think back to my military days where, when I first went in, if you said the word run, I would get tired. I was just not, I was just not, I wasn't thinking about, I don't think I processed, when I went in that running was a part of the military. I just thought I was going to be in that cute Class A, skirt suit with with the little black hat. It was back in the 70s. I did not process fatigues and combat boots, and I was going to be running a lot. Um, but using that as an example, it is, back in those days, I could not run very far. I did a lot of remedial PT, physical training, a lot of remedial stuff because, I joke and tell people I suck at sports. I'm just not, no. But then over time, I disciplined myself to, get out and practice running. So I would, run, start out with, okay, let me at least make it a half a mile, then let me make it 2 miles. And I share this with, with the groups that I work with, when it talks about goal setting and things, where I set a goal for myself that I wanted to be able to run 2 miles in 15 minutes or less. And, and I said, now I had to break that down into little, like subgroups. I was like, okay, so if I can run a half a mile in this particular time and then the next half a mile in this particular time. And by the time I, got around that, 2 miles, would be 15 minutes. And, I ended up doing it. And I actually, was blessed to achieve that goal when I was in drill sergeant school. So I was like, here I was in drill sergeant school. It was our last final, physical fitness test before we graduated. And, what a place to do it, but anyway, I look at what we're doing as that same marathon. We are just starting out. We're
Right.
on that first, half mile. And, it's, we know we're going to get over here. We're going to get to that, whatever that finish spot is. But for us, it's a finish spot that doesn't really exist.
exactly.
Because I see this work continuing, for a long time, and I want to say to you that I echo what everybody else says. This started because of you and this foundation, and don't sell yourself short. I tell people there's a lot of dynamite in that tiny little package.
It's kind of been that way most of my life, I guess,
Yes,
but
yes.
this kind of has taken hold. I wanted to mention too, another way that our family kind of honors Bobby every year is our great nieces, Haley and Josie. Haley's the one, she started it the first 2 years, decorating a antique door for the foundation for our auction. And this year, the little one, Josie, she helped out, and the girls, they're so talented. They put the words to a Beatles song on that Chevy door. It's an antique Chevy door. The girls did it themselves, and that's their way every year of honoring their great uncle, and who they adored, and he adored them. It's up for auction on the Bobby White Foundation Facebook page under events. And to bid on it, all you got to do is leave your bid amount in the comments section underneath the image, and all the proceeds will go to the foundation. I'm really proud of those girls, how they have. I mean, the first year that Haley did it, I think she kind of knew how her uncle died. She was probably around 11, but she wasn't actually really told, and she was told like on the way to the event.
Gotcha.
And I was mortified with my nephew. But when she showed up, I looked at her and she looked at me and she just ran as hard as she could towards me and gave me the biggest hug. And I just lost it. And her first door went for like $1,700 or $1,800.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and the starting bid on this door is $1,000. And the window does roll up and down. It works.
Good.
So we have that, and again, we have our T-shirts, which I'm just so proud of that we have those now, and really in a week we've sold well over a dozen of them,
Nice.
and have more orders coming in, which is really, it's great, and it's just another way that you can help the foundation, because if you're out wearing the T-shirt, they'll get to notice the logo, the foundation logo, more. I was at a business event with John a couple of weeks ago and was talking to a gal, and I only had one business card.
Mhm.
And she saw the logo of the business card, and she goes, "I've heard of you guys." And that was great. So, again, we want to thank John and Rob, and I just want to say this, and he's behind the scenes, so he probably won't be too embarrassed, but our technician Rob is here sick today, and he's doing a wonderful job, and I just want to thank him because he really doesn't feel good.
Yeah, I know, when they do it while they're sick, you know. Do it while they're
So
sick.
we really appreciate it so much. So don't forget Greg Schindler's State Farm office if you need an insurance quote. That'll go through the end of April. They've done it 2 months straight. Just give them a call, get an insurance quote, and they'll donate to the foundation. So remember,
There's always hope.
there's always hope.